Did you ever notice that it's possible to say that you're happy and at the same time to say that you're not happy? It's a funny space that we are able to inhabit. We're happy, but we're not happy. And put it the other way around, on the surface I'm sad, but inside I'm joyful. When I was a child, I was happy. Maybe because I prayed. I knelt at the bedside every night and whispered little mantras in the dark. There are 4 corners on my bed. There are 4 angels round my head. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. God bless the bed that I lie on. It was safe then to dive onto a soft mattress, dressed in sheets and pillowcases. And 60 years later, after all my coming and going with God and religion, I'm not much different. The 4 angels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, were boys with feathered wings in my imagination. And they became my imaginary friends. They were soft like fog or watercolours rather than substantial. They travelled around in my imagination when I was in primary school. They sheltered behind my eyes. They whispered in my ears. They even flitted about in the corner of the playground. I would leave my schoolmates at a distance and loiter in a corner beside the wall where I could talk to these phantoms. When I became a teenager, the 4 willowy angel boys, who had been so like a soft pink mist or cloud around me, they became more substantial. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John mutated into John, Paul, George and Ringo, collectively known as the Beatles. They turned into substantial gods. I saw them on television and knew them instantly. On Wednesday afternoons when the school closed for the half day and all my classmates were sucking Coca-Cola through straws in the Central Cafe down on Bridge Street, I retired to the dark dining room of our stuffy, middle-class, suburban, semi-detached, and turned on my father's black box gramophone and slipped on the long playing record called Rubber Soul, which I was convinced was the best album the Beatles had ever recorded. And I would sing for an hour in harmony with my 4 wonderful friends. I forgot about angels, and I stopped saying prayers at bedtime, and like other children I began wrestling with sexual desires at night. One summer when I was 11, I had experienced a sudden awakening in the Gaeltacht, in the front room of a bungalow on a bunk bed with a boy my own age. It was a long, slow kiss between children. And after an hour, he held me knowingly. We embraced in a beautiful, dry shimmering, which changed me. His kisses felt like the touch of a strange and beautiful other. It was as close to what adults would call God as I could imagine. And when the ecstasy was over, the world seemed drab and mediocre but I knew that it was also peppered with moments of intense and beautiful forgetting. I had fallen in love, and when I came home from that holiday, I turned my attention to the even more amazing possibilities of finding intimacy with girls in the dance halls of Cavan and Longford, and the carnivals at Lavey Strand and Drumlish on summer nights. And perhaps I've never fallen out of love since. There's always someone, a person, a cat, a ghost, that touches me, because love is a capacity. The wonder of it lies in self-forgetting, that same abandonment that was once required to dive off the top of a tar barrel into the waters of Anna Lake near Butler's Bridge when I was 10 years of age. After my first erotic encounter in the Donegal Gaeltacht, I surrendered to poetry, sunsets, invisible deities, even ritual and prayer, and the transcendence of Loreto girls on their bicycles. I surrendered to girls everywhere, and to fish in the waters of Loch Uachtar, with a sense not of shuddering, but being shuddered, a sense not of taking anything from others, but of being taken. I had no choice. They came as they willed, gods and heroes, angels and fishes, and creatures of erotic perfection by night and by day. I prayed and fell in love with equal devotion. Nobody told me that an erotic life was incompatible with prayer. I got it mixed up in the sense that I thought erotic life was prayer. When I wasn't being tossed at night in furious embraces with phantom girls in school uniforms, I went with ease into the arms of any ghost or saint that might have me, and to the comfort of angels, and to the mother of Jesus. Walking the streets of Warsaw at 64 years of age, alone for an entire month in winter, didn't seem like the fulfillment of that young spirit. It had felt like the opposite, like everything I had been and hoped for was dead. And I had walked so much during the first week that my left leg had gone numb right down my thigh. It had worried me, so I had asked my friend, Dr. Google, what it could mean. Cause of numb leg, I typed in the search space, and I got 500,000 options. According to Dr. Google, tight underpants might cause severe numbness in the leg, so clearly I had found the problem. I went out and bought an enormous pair of trousers, waist size 45, and a double extra large underpants. Although when I returned to the apartment and tried on the new clothes for an hour or two, my leg was even worse. I lay on the bed for 2 days to rest until the numbness began to thaw and sensation returned. I ventured out again, though it was -2 on the streets and sleet was sweeping across the parks and pavements, leaving a white sheen on the world like scattered salt. My trousers were so loose that my underpants fell down inside the trousers. I bought a tin of tomato soup at a nearby shop, returned, undressed, and felt the leg. It was still numb, and so I faced another day or two indoors. I opened my Kindle and downloaded the Philokalia, which is a complete compendium of writings from the early Desert Fathers. I had heard that Evagrius, a monk of the 4th century, was worth studying on the subject of despondency, and in desperation I began to trust old monks and ancient mystics and a multitude of orthodox Christian websites, rather than Google, despite their flowery language and propensity to blame all ailments on demons rather than scientific or medical diagnosis. Every so often I would come across some tall, bearded young man with an American accent on YouTube, wearing the robes of an Orthodox priest, swaggering around the microphone and smiling with the understated steel of a 4-star general as he spoke about the evils of the modern world. But I found that if I closed him off before I heard whatever guff came out of his mouth, he didn't bother me. He didn't disturb the benign feeling that was growing in my heart for the wisdom of the ancient Christian tradition. Those solitary explorers of the inner mind who lived in the deserts and in the caves, or on wild cliff-edge monasteries on the west coast of Ireland before modern psychiatry was invented, spoke in a poetic language that drew me in, phrase by phrase and word by word. And I'm sorry for the interruption of the bell, but it's a chime, a beautiful chime that comes from my wind-up clock, an Edwardian clock I got as a gift about 2 or 3 months ago. And when I'm here in my little shed studio, I now have a habit of putting on the clock, winding it up, putting it to the correct time, and off we go. And it interrupts me every 15 minutes with the chime. And I remember what the Christian brother said to me when we were in primary school. We had this little prayer. Every hour the bell would ring and somebody had to lead the prayer. Let us remember we are in the presence of God. And that was the first fundamental lesson I had in transcendence. I've never forgotten it. And I deeply appreciate it to this day. And you might say that later in life there was a sophistication happened in my idea about God, so that I moved from the Christian position of a deep faith in the transcendence of a personal God to the Buddhist position of kind of an enlightenment that doesn't affirm the identity of a particular God, but yet celebrates the sense of being enlightened and the unity of enlightened consciousness that we are all drawn to through our karmic journeys. So I might have got a little bit more sophisticated over the years about the theology, and no wonder if I was reading all that orthodox stuff. But it's simply the same thing. A bell goes, and I think there is a presence I must pay attention to. There's a lovely phrase I read recently. Again, it's by an orthodox fella. He was saying that prayer is simply to stand before God and pay attention. That gets it for me, that says it. Just to be present. And that's the journey of mindfulness. And mindfulness, whatever exercise you do, brings you into a sense of consciousness about yourself, your identity, and the thoughts going through your mind. And in that position of kind of equanimity, you might say, and awareness to negative emotions, positive emotions, all the things around you, the physicality of the world, being present, you can take the next step yourself. The next step is to feel your mind going into the heart, and then you're just standing in love before God. You're actually before God. Or alternatively, you're slipping into a kind of sense of presence, calm abiding, close to the path of enlightenment. And I got into all that stuff, in a confused way, where I mixed up as a very young child the erotic with the beauty of the other. That in some sense everything beautiful that comes before us has a hidden depth and a hidden conscious energy. Whether it be the snow-capped mountain that's just in front of me as I speak through the window, Slieve van Éireann, the other side of the lake, utterly beautiful in the dying, fading light of January, astonishing. To see it literally is to half see it, to see it as something emanating from a hidden ground of being, and to feel the relationship between me and it as one of love, one of like standing before the mountain, standing before God, in love, with love. That's the kind of stuff, that's the kind of crazy nonsense that I'd be listening to and reading. And then every so often I kind of stand back from it, or I have sort of mechanisms not to get too serious about religion, because that's, I feel, one of my unique tricks in life is the sense of enjoying, celebrating, engaging with faith, but never clenching the fist around it and saying, I have found some kind of truth. And that's why I'm never sharing with you like a teacher, like I'm never telling you what the story, what the truth is, what the ideas are. I'm really sharing my story, and my story is a story of a very confused person who has journeyed through life, hopping from one thing to another, and is quite confused about everything, completely, totally. I know less now than I did then. And yet I feel that way of kind of acknowledging how little I know is a kind of path towards wisdom as well. Anyway, I was reading coming out of the book Chest Pain, which I wrote a few years ago, just before I got a heart attack, by the way. Those descriptions of being in Warsaw and having a numb leg in January, and I didn't know what the big numbness was in my leg, but 9 months later I had a heart attack. I'm just going to go on with this little story about being in Warsaw during the winter of 2018. And it was this time 4 years ago. A kiss had a beautiful significance in the flowery language of that ancient religion, Christianity. A kiss was not just a kiss. It could be a metaphor. The entire world was described by ancient mystics as a kiss. It was where the invisible world touched this world. A kiss was nothing in itself. It was what two people did, and it was how they connected. Similarly, the earth itself was not substantial. It was more like a veil. And the point at which the ancient monk engaged with it could be described as the kiss. Me and Slieve van Éireann is the kiss. It is the place where I come into contact with the energy of God. It was a point of exquisitely beautiful connection between the little monk there in the desert who viewed it and the mysterious other beyond the veil, who in the eternity of that moment was touching the surface of things as intimately as a lover. Florid ideas, yes, but in the face of a numb leg, they calmed me. You see, that's where we get to religion, isn't it? Be truthful. I mean, I get very religious when I'm scared. When health, old age worry me, I get very religious. Does that undermine my enthusiasm for religion? No, it makes total sense to me. Why wouldn't you? Good time to be into religion. If you're scared, if you're uneasy, if you're lonely, if you're worried, or if you're ill. Because religion is a consolation. Simple as that. And so, all those florid ideas, and as I say, sometimes I'll have to turn off the sound on some of the old Orthodox preachers because they'd be very fiery, particularly American ones. Very, very fiery, like generals. But I still love to hear the ideas, florid ideas. And as I say, they made sense when you have a numb leg and you're worried about yourself. And when the leg had improved, those ideas had kept me going for hours as I wandered aimlessly around Warsaw without knowing where I was heading, but that I was in the slipstream of my own devotional fervour, a kind of here in the heart that kept me walking. At the junction of every new street, I wondered where I might end up. I felt I was not unlike a 7th century monk who might sit in the boat with his oars up and wait for the tide to take him where the tide wished. One day I bumped into 5 nuns, huddled together on a street outside a restaurant. I gawked at them because, even in Warsaw, a city of strong religious orthodoxies and well-regulated religious life, nuns have become as scarce as hen's teeth, and are not as often seen in public as they were in the old days. Whenever I did notice one, flapping in her black robes or gleaming like a beacon on a street corner with a white veil, I tended to follow behind them out of curiosity, and I suppose an unconscious yearning to belong in their world of gentle certainty. They were huddled in a circle. 3 of them were elderly but sprightly and thin, like nuns are supposed to be, and the other 2 were young and plump. The older ones were in black from their covered heads to their sandaled toes. One of the young ones had a long black habit, but she wore no veil, and I guessed she might be a novice. Her cheeks were flushed, and she bubbled with rustic cheerfulness. But the other young nun, also in a long black robe, wore a white veil and had a guitar case strapped on her back and her face tilted to one side like she was yearning for something. I couldn't stop wondering what might be in her heart. Perhaps she dreamed of being in a folk group. Perhaps she was lonely. Perhaps the guitar and the quiet longing in her eyes revealed something of a disappointment with life. Maybe she was in despair and didn't actually believe in Christ or any God at all. Maybe she regretted all the human intimacy that she had abandoned the day she robed herself in black. If that were the case, then her struggle was no more tragic than mine, because deep down, all my relationships with the saints in Egyptian deserts, the angels in heaven, and even Christ himself, who stood just beyond my fingertips when I surfed on Orthodox websites, didn't imply any religious convictions in the traditional sense. I knew from having to survive alone with a sore leg that believing in any magic is beneficial if it gets a person through the day. Faith, for me, was always a survival mechanism, and besides, most spiritual paths conclude in disappointment, if not sorrow. Maybe the young nun should try Buddhism, I thought. It's not so much a religion as a psychotherapy, and it doesn't disappoint as much as Christianity because it doesn't offer as much. The truth is that I'd sell Buddhism to the cats if I could. In fact, I tried once at home when I was idle and had nobody to talk to, only me furry little companion. When the beloved was away and the sleet was falling on the roof and the little pot-bellied stove was crackling with logs and the cat was curled up on a sofa staring at me like a grumpy monk, we would fall into a deep and fantastical relationship. "I want chicken," the cat declared. "You're not getting chicken," I replied. "But your beloved gives me chicken," the cat protested. So I corrected him. "She gives you the skin of the chicken." He rolled on his side, turned his backside and the remnants of his testicles towards my face, and stared at the flames in the stove. "She gives you scraps when she has roasted a chicken," I continued. "But I don't roast chickens. I live out of plastic bags and cartons. I give you dry food. I don't make a fuss about you like she does. She favours you in particular, as opposed to all the other mangy cats in Leitrim. She differentiates. She sees you as special, but I don't consider that very Buddhist." "She's kind," the cat muttered. "That's Buddhist." "Yeah, but she's killing you with kindness," I replied. "Then she goes away and all you have is me and a bag of dried nuggets. And you won't eat them because you're spoiled. How could you ever survive in the wilderness if you don't take what you get?" "I don't live in the wilderness," he whinged, his eyes watering. "I live with you. I thought you liked me." "I refuse to make a fuss about you. I'm trying to be emotionally detached," I shouted, and I was very nearly getting the broom from the kitchen. "You call yourself detached?" the cat replied. Admittedly, I was a bit irritated. "Are you annoyed with me?" he wondered. "Yes," I said. "I'm thoroughly frustrated with the way you're looking for a chicken that I don't have." "You do have chicken," the cat screamed. "I saw little bits of chicken last night floating in the Thai soup that you took home from the takeaway." I saw him bang his paws on the floor and tears came out of his eyes, and I thought he looked remarkably like Michael Gove. "You do have chicken," he insisted. Okay, so I have chicken." I went to the bin in the kitchen and took out the white plastic container from the Chinese takeaway, hoping to find the dregs of the soup, but not a single scrap remained. Then a new idea arose in the universe. I took a chicken stock cube from the pantry, warmed it in a saucepan with a few spoons of water, and poured it over the dry food. "Come out here and see what I've got," I shouted from the pantry because he was still stretched at the stove. I waved the bowl of nuggets and warm chicken stock under his whiskers. His nose twitched. He sniffed the bowl for a long while, walked away, but then returned. Finally he looked at me and uttered a barely audible sigh as if to say, "Thank you." And he started munching and devouring, and halfway through he looked up at me again, and I felt ashamed that I had been angry with him. When he was finished, we both sat at the pot-bellied stove, and I put on another log, and the sleet was still falling outside, but we were cosy enough. I was looking forward to his company for the rest of the evening. Perhaps I was a cat, I thought, and am now reincarnated as a human. Or perhaps he was a human and is now reincarnated as a cat. Who knows? I was missing my beloved, and so I had taken my frustration out on him. But some rhythm in the universe brought us together like two monks in a monastery. He was missing my beloved's cooking, so he pestered me. But with compassion and the imaginative power of a human brain, we had found a solution. Chicken stock cubes. Now we could both sit happily at the stove for the rest of the evening, free from loneliness, detached from further desires, in a calm and shared state of contemplation. But then he surprised me again by heading for the back door. "Where are you going now?" I wondered. "Out for a shite," he said. He walked into the backyard and dissolved in darkness, as if he had achieved a level of supreme detachment far beyond my comprehension. By now the nuns had agreed among themselves what they were doing, and they began to stride the broad pavement down Main Street in Warsaw in a row of 5, as people dodged them with respect due to nuns. I walked behind them. I wanted to tell them it's not possible any more to live as they are living. In the end they will fall back on their own self, no matter what cloister they hide in, and failure will become part of their bone marrow as the pages of their prayer books turn yellow and age wrinkles their hidden faces. I followed them in their hollow cheerfulness, my eyes on the young one with her sad guitar strapped to her back, as they all went into the Church of the Holy Cross. I too blessed myself at the door and went deep inside, and there they sat up in the front pew, whispering some prayers or psalms in Polish. I sat in the back pew and felt less isolated than I was outside, because even the remote contact with the hem of their garments comforted me. I sat for half an hour until my leg thawed. I was warm again, and then the nuns withdrew. They gathered up their emotions, wrapped their long black robes around them, zipped up their shining black anoraks and genuflected with slow attention to the red sanctuary lamp hanging above the altar. The Church of the Holy Cross is like the heart of Warsaw, the heart of Poland. It's the church that the Germans blew up after the Warsaw Uprising, a heroic moment in the summer of 1944, when the Polish underground resistance led by the Home Army tried to liberate Warsaw from German occupation. A bronze statue of Christ stands outside the main door. It had ended up in the rubble when the Germans were finished, but in the 50s the building was restored and Christ returned to an upright position. "Lift up your hearts," he said. Even Chopin's heart is here, embedded in a pillar in the main hall of the church, although the nuns didn't stop to notice that, as they headed for the back door, refreshed by their prayers, as confident as magpies. Which is not to say that I dislike either magpies or nuns, but of the two, it's certainly less easy to love the magpies. They are unlucky, or at least some people say so. Their black and white feathers become a metaphor for tragedy. In Leitrim we had a dog who lived outside in the yard and was given a bowl of cereal every morning. One morning I was woken by the sound of battling magpies gorging on the leavings of his dinner. Before the magpies came there were goldfinches, coal tits, thrushes and blackbirds, but the dog's dinner changed the ecological balance. And it's even stranger how the tiniest fracture in the best relationship, like failing to agree about how to empty the dishwasher, can grow into a monstrous resentment, and an unfortunate magpie might just sit on the clothesline at the wrong moment and be forever seen as a harbinger of sorrow. as a signal of how much unquiet is hidden underneath the surface of things. I withdrew from the church despondent, and did not bother to genuflect. I wrapped up in the porch, stared at a beggar woman who had been sitting on the wet ground just outside as if she were an enemy, and began to trek back to my apartment. I had lost interest in the 5 nuns and hobbled home on a limp leg. I opened up the laptop and flipped through the pages of my Facebook friends. 7 minutes earlier, Natasha had posted a picture of an icon. Natasha was a Russian who worked in a theatre in London. I had met her through an actor friend who had been in the musical Warsaw, which I went to see when it first opened. Natasha was with him at the bar, a dark-haired woman in a black lace dress, with passionate views about theatrical design, Vladimir Putin and wild horses. She loved all 3 with equal intensity. We got on well and met on a few other occasions for coffees whenever I was in London to see stage plays. She had a daughter married to an Irishman, and eventually we became friendly enough for her to invite me to a dinner in her apartment just after Christmas one year. The beloved was with me, and Natasha's daughter and her Irish husband were also at the table. It was a wonderful family celebration in early January. The icon Natasha posted on Facebook when I was in Warsaw depicted Jesus on the cross, and though it was dark and ornate, it was also dramatically different from the twisted Jesus writhing in pain that I had been accustomed to in Western churches. In Natasha's icon, Jesus was not in agony. Far from it. He looked serene, with his arms outstretched rather than nailed to the wood. It must be the beginning of Lent, I thought, in the Orthodox Church, and suddenly I loved her for posting her icon. My grandfather was a priest, Natasha had said to me at the Christmas dinner when myself and the beloved visited. The dining room walls were white, and the curtains were white, and the Christmas tree was white, and there were blue lights on the tree. I said, Pushkin was shot in the snow. She said, would you like to go to St. Petersburg? I said I'd love to. I think Russian writers are very spiritual. Then she poured me another vodka. I was looking at the icons in the corner of the room. We Irish have lost our sense of the sacred, I concluded. We need Russians to invigorate us again. You are correct, she agreed, and she refreshed my glass yet again. In St. Petersburg, she said, we believed in Father Frost, and he was invisible, although he came on Christmas night with his granddaughter, and they always dressed in blue. Stuffed sea bass, Russian salads, and herrings wrapped in potato, onion and beetroot were spread on the table as she poured more drink. I thought she said, this is called heron in a fur coat, as she pointed at one fish. What a wonderful image, I declared, a heron in a fur coat. No, she said, not heron, herring. It is called herring in a fur coat. Well, it's delicious, I said. So now we will have goose for main course, she declared, and so we did. But we didn't have music, which was a pity. Just more vodka. I told her that I always liked music with dinner. Ah, she said, now you sound like Tolstoy. After the meal, she opened another bottle. Her daughter and partner were still at the table, as was the beloved, but I moved to the couch. Natasha was tidying away the dishes. The beloved was asking the young man what part of Galway he was from. I was absorbed with the little icon corner, the red lamp beneath an icon of the Nativity that had been burning all through our meal. And so from Warsaw I sent her a message back on Facebook. Hello, Natasha. I'm in Warsaw with a sore leg, and it's very cold outside. How's the weather in London? I put a like beside the icon of Christ and posted my message. And then I opened Google Maps to see if I could find an Orthodox church in Warsaw. The whole universe shimmering on the surface of that which is underneath. This is my way to wish you a very, very happy new year, and thank you for being here. Bye-bye.